Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Furlough, Leave and the Job Retention Scheme, what social businesses need to know. This webinar is brought to you by Social Business Wales, which is funded by the Welsh Government and the European Regional Development Fund and managed by ourselves here at the Wales Cooperative Centre. We've only got a relatively short amount of time for this webinar today, so unfortunately we won't be taking any direct questions. If you have any questions that you can ask in a generic manner, please use the comments option, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. My colleagues Joelle and Carl are reviewing the comment section as we go, and they'll either signpost you to relevant information or make a note of your query, they hopefully will be able to get back to you. If we've got the time at the end of this presentation, we'll try and pull together some of those questions and ask them directly to Shakira, who's joining us today. If it's anything very specific, I'd ask you please email them separately to sbwinquiries@wales.coop, and a business advisor will get back to you directly. So we're muting the audio and video for participants today. We've had a couple of instances in the past couple of weeks where bandwidth has dropped out quite suddenly. So that's part of the reason. The other reason is that although Zoom is a great tool, there's a lot of people on this call today. And if everybody's mic is on, it becomes really, really difficult to manage it. So thank you, and I appreciate your patience with that. We're recording these webinars. We're publishing links to them on our website, wales.coop/COVID-19, and these will be up as soon as possible. The intention is to publish the slides that we're using this morning onto the site too. There's also a briefing note which Shakira has put together on furlough leave and the job retention scheme. That's already on the website and already there for you to use. So my name is David Madge. I'm one of the project managers in SBW, Social Business Wales, and I'm also the lead on market development within the operation. Joining me today is Shakira Joyner. Shakira is the Managing Director of HCHR, which is a human resources consultancy which is based in Swansea. Shakira has compiled our briefing note, which I mentioned earlier on furlough leave and the job retention scheme. On this page, this is a page that we put into all of our webinars. It details some of the resources that are available to you and some of the resources that we're going back to on a regular basis. The first two, wales.coop, I've already mentioned. The information on that is also mirrored on our Social Business Wales page on the Business Wales portal. The general Business Wales portal itself also has some very, very good information on it and very specific support around some business planning, business organisation. So that's also worth having a look at for that reason. For updates about government and UK support, refer back to the Welsh Government and UK Government websites. And for updates about the coronavirus itself and its effect in Wales, we use the Public Health Wales website, which is kept very up to date as well. So, the coronavirus job retention scheme and furloughing staff. The link that I've put into the presentation there is the most up-to-date resource that we've been able to find on the UK Government website for this scheme. This is one to refer back to as the details are updated and clarified. As I pointed out on the slide today, we've got to add a caveat at this point. The information we're presenting today is correct to the best of our knowledge at this point, but it is worth checking back on the web on these websites. It's worth staying up to date on it, and we are presenting this information as signposting at this point rather than specific advice. So the scheme itself was announced the Friday before last on the 20th of March. It's designed to support employers whose operations have been severely affected by coronavirus. Its intention is to help businesses to cover their employee costs during the downturn in work, which obviously nobody was actually expecting, and hopefully avoid having to implement permanent layoff or redundancy procedures. It's intended to apply to any employer in the country, whether they're small or large, charitable or non-profit. So whatever you feel about the terminology for the organisations that are on this webinar, it should apply to most, if not all, of the organisations. So the scheme is available to all UK businesses with an eligible pay-as-you-earn scheme. For businesses to access the scheme, they need to designate effective employees as furloughed workers and also to notify their employees of this change. Important point to note, and Shakira will come back to this later, that changing the status of employees remains subject to existing employment law. After that, you need to submit information to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs about the employees that have been furloughed and their earnings through an online portal. HMRC are currently setting up these systems and we expect them to be in place by the end of April, but obviously this is something that you need to refer back to government sources to get up-to-date information on. The scheme itself intends to reimburse 80% of workers' wage costs up to a maximum of £2,500 per month. It applies to all employees who have been asked to stop work but who have been kept on business payroll. These are described as furloughed workers. Employers must be able to demonstrate that their operations have been severely affected by the outbreak. At this point, we don't know how closely the scheme will look at the extent of the disruption. Also within the guidelines at this point, there's no reference to the employer's ability to pay wages based on that. So I'm going to hand over to Shakira now for the legal position.
Hello, good morning all. So the legal position, the term furloughed is not currently defined as part of employment legislation. And actually, until last Friday, I'd never actually heard of it in the whole of my career. Government guidance reflects the need in a layoff situation for an agreement between the employer and the employees to be reached. This changes the status of an employee and is subject to existing employment law. What that means in practice is that you have a duty to consult, and that consultation needs to take place if you're looking to furlough over 20 employees. It's actually unclear what would happen if an employee does not agree to being furloughed. The reason I say this is I think the vast majority of people won't be unhappy with being paid 80% of salary minimum and working from home. If you do find that you are in this position, there are multiple avenues that you could look to pursue, i.e. taking holidays as agreed, even a period of unpaid leave. But I think it's going to be probably something that won't hopefully cross your path. So the process. Now, there are quite a number of pitfalls in terms of people's understanding of the process. The government guidance states that employers should discuss furlough proposals with staff and make changes to the employment contract by agreement. Now, some organisations have already jumped the gun, sent employees home and actually haven't sought agreement and don't have anything in writing. This is a concern because essentially you are changing the employment relationship, and it is, although a temporary change, a change of contract. So employees will need to check contracts of employment for layoff, short-time working clauses, review the volume of work and decide which employees to designate as furloughed employees. So this measure, we mustn't forget why furlough has been brought in to support organisations. It's in order to avoid layoff and or redundancies. So you need to notify the furloughed employees of the intended change and consider, as I said earlier, consultations with employee representatives or trade unions if an agreement is in place or over 20 employees to be furloughed. Excuse me. And then you agree the change with employees. A furlough agreement should be put in place and this should be in writing. So you confirm the employee's temporary new status, and this is a subsidy eligibility requirement and a record must be kept of this correspondence. Then you submit the information to the HMRC. This is going to be done via the portal as previously mentioned and is expected to be operational by the end of April. What we don't know actually at this point is the mechanics of that portal and what questions may be asked in terms of eligibility. So what we're saying is, keep an audit trail of the process of selection of why an employee is being furloughed. You need to ensure that employees do not carry out any further work for the business. You cannot furlough someone and they still be working for yourself at home. That's not how the scheme is designed to work. In addition, as employers, you can claim associated employee NI contributions and minimum automatic employer pension contributions, and all payments under the scheme will be subject to the usual income tax and other deductions.
Okay, so go on, Shakira, sorry.
handing back to you. That's all I was going to say.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so there's a relationship with other forms of absence that you will need to consider. Obviously, not all of your employees will be working as normal when this happens, so these are sort of variations to consider. So sick leave, employees who are currently on sick leave or have had to self-isolate should receive statutory sick pay rather than furloughing. But as soon as they've recovered, as soon as they're actually fit for work or no longer self-isolating, they can then be furloughed. Unpaid leave, employees who are on unpaid leave can't be furloughed unless they were placed on unpaid leave after the 28th of February 2020. And I think this date is the key date going throughout this. So if they were placed on unpaid leave after 28th of February 2020, they can be furloughed. Before that, they can't. Family-friendly leave. Furlough leave doesn't reduce or change any of the employment rights that your employees have beyond any written and agreed contractual variation. So points that you might need to consider is how employees look at their family-friendly leave. They may decide that family-friendly leave actually doesn't offer them the same as furloughed leave does. So they may actually refrain from exercising their right to family leave, and you may need to take a position on this. There may also be an effect on maternity leave and the length of time chosen to be taken on maternity leave. Again, this is something to consider. It may be dependent on your policies that the furlough leave or the furlough process actually is more attractive to the person taking maternity leave. However, it's worth remembering that the furlough leave is effectively on a minimum of a 3-week turnover. So if the business takes a decision that they need to return people to work, then that may affect somebody who's chosen to take a shortened maternity leave as a result of this. Gardening leave or working notice following being made redundant. Any employees that made redundant since the 28th of February again can be re-engaged and put on furlough leave. Employees can't be on both furlough leave and holiday leave. Employers still have the right to tell employees when to take holiday if they need to. So again, it's down to operational issues. This is something that all employers can do at the moment. But the government has announced it's allowing workers the right to carry over up to 4 weeks of annual leave into the next 2 leave years. And I think, Shakira, that's something you wanted to come back in on, wasn't it?
Yes, so a temporary law was made last Friday, which allows workers and employers to carry forward 4 weeks annual leave over the next 2 years. And the reason for this, I think, is to obviously manage holiday entitlement when we do get back to normality, and to ensure that, rightly so, workers don't lose their entitlement. But on the other side, also that businesses can get back to normal without a huge influx of people wanting to take their holidays, so that they don't lose them. So up to 4 weeks can be carried forward over the next 2 years, and can be used obviously in line with business need, etc. There's also been a lot of queries actually recently around imposing holidays and furlough. That's something that a lot of my clients have been asking about, in terms of, can I impose holidays during this time while I either decide to furlough staff or look at what the workflow is going to look like? The easy answer is yes, you can. However, you do need to give double the amount of notice for the holiday to be taken. So, for example, if you wish employees to take 1 week, you need to give them 2 weeks notice.
Okay, thanks for that.
So in terms of the claiming procedures, employees need to claim for wage costs through the online system once it's up and running. And as we said earlier, we're hopeful that that's going to be at the end of April. It's at an employer's discretion as to whether they choose to top up that additional 20%, which is in excess of the 80% or the 2,500 cap. However, this reduction in entitlement to 80% needs to be agreed with the employees, because essentially it is a deduction from salary. it applies to full-time and part-time employees, and it's actual salary before tax as of the 28th of February. So it's what your payroll looked like on the 28th of February, and in order to calculate the 80%. Please note that no fees, commissions or bonuses should be included in that calculation. There are different approaches for employees whose pay varies. So it's either calculated as the higher figure of average monthly earnings for the 2019-20 tax year, or the same month's earnings the previous years. Only one claim can be submitted at least every 3 weeks. We're not quite sure, to be honest, of the mechanics of how the claiming process is going to work. But what the scheme is very clear about is that it runs in 3-week cycles. So the minimum someone can be furloughed for is for 3 weeks. And this can, obviously, the claim can also be backdated to March the 1st, 2020. Employees who are paid weekly, this is going to be slight difference in terms of your payroll and your accountancy. Employers can only claim for the 3 weeks interval, so not for weekly paid employees. Payment will be paid to employers direct into a UK bank account, and obviously the claim is in accordance with actual payroll amounts at the point of which you run payroll. When should employees on furlough leave be paid? This is one of the key considerations for organisations at the moment, looking at their cash flow, and so many unknowns for all of us right now. It's unlikely that the scheme will be able to sanction payments in line with the business payroll date, and already, as we know, that the scheme isn't going to be up and running until the end of April in terms of the portal and actually access to the scheme. Businesses may need to find the means to pay employees themselves whilst they wait for the grant, which should be received obviously at a later date. In the event that an employer cannot afford to make the payments until receipt, so in line with normal monthly payroll, they need to, in the first instance, advise the employees of the position and obtain their agreement, and also look at the other options available in terms of business interruption loans and bridging funding that could be considered to support you to still make those monthly payroll payments.
Thanks, Shakira. And on the loan and bridging funding, just to mention that we're planning another webinar early next week on the products that are out there for Welsh social businesses. So hopefully that's something that you can bookmark ready. So at this point, we have a few questions for Shakira. So I'll start that off with, if I was an employer, Shakira, how would I decide which of my employees were at risk and would have been laid off during this during this crisis? I mean, obviously we need to find a way of doing this. So is there criteria that I can use, or is there a particular process I can use?
I mean, businesses need to review the business need and workflow. The whole idea of the job retention scheme is to save those that would have been laid off and or worst case scenario made redundant due to the current crisis. So I would say businesses need to look at what roles are actually needed, who is actually busy at the moment in terms of their role. It's the case that some businesses have completely closed their doors and nobody is working, but some of us are still trying to, on a skeleton staff, continue to provide the service that we offer. So the criteria is based on the roles and the requirements for business continuity. And in terms of looking at what that looks like, if you've got multiple people and maybe you only need 3 out of 10 doing a specific role, I would apply the same criteria as you would in a redundancy situation and selection pool. But also I think it's quite logical to ask for volunteers. So the one thing I'm saying to everybody, it's about keeping an open line of communication with your employees, and some of the really tough decisions will naturally fall away if you actually communicate with your staff and say, is there anybody who would like to volunteer for furlough? Obviously you may get more volunteers than you need, and then you'll obviously have to apply the same selection. But I think the logical approach is to ask, maybe as in the first instance, who would like to be considered for furlough.
Okay. A lot of questions that have come up, Shakira, while we've been working and trying to give advice to clients around this is, you mentioned that there's a 3-week minimum period that people can be furloughed for. Are employers able to rotate that? So, for example, put someone on for 3 weeks, then take them off as the business needs, or are they stuck on it?
No, absolutely, you can. So what we know about the scheme is they're saying that it is a 3-week cycle as a minimum, as you rightly say, but that actually you can bring people back into the organisation. So it's about being available for work, and if there is work there, then people can obviously do that. And it could be that you have a project coming up that you could plan for or maybe work towards, so that there may not be work as we sit here now, but we're going to plan to restart, or plan to focus on something that's future focused that you could use an employee for, and you could take them off furlough and obviously pay them by normal means.
Oh, that's great. And another really common thing that we've been asked over the last 2 weeks is that people understand that they can put their staff on furlough, but is there an option that those staff members can possibly volunteer doing the same role that they had? So quite a lot of examples we've had have been around like marketing and social media, where they don't have the business needs to have somebody full time, but they still need to keep a presence. So if they could have that person volunteer for 1 day a week, say, is that possible within the scheme, that people can be furloughed but still then volunteer in that same role?
Unfortunately not. The scheme is very clear about this, that a worker cannot work when on furlough. Even when they volunteer, it cannot generate revenue or provide a service. So the volunteer element is for something that would be outside of the person's normal role, and as I said, couldn't generate or provide any service, is the actual description from the scheme.
Oh, thank you for clearing that up. I know a lot of our social businesses were really keen to know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shakira, for that. That's been really, really helpful, and hopefully it's been quite insightful for our audience. As we close this, just a quick reminder of the services that Social Business Wales can offer. If you have specific inquiries on furloughing, on funding, on general business support, please contact us on 0300 111 50 50, or email us on sbwinquiries@wales.coop. The websites, I'll mention them again: wales.coop/COVID-19, and the Social Business Wales website on the Business Wales portal. Both have up-to-date information. They have a number of briefing notes, including a briefing note on this subject. So please do let people that you work with know that this information is there, and please do contact us if you need any specific help. Thank you once again for joining us today.